If there's one good thing that came from the Jeffrey Epstein case, it is the new awareness and interest in a 30-year-old case right here in South Africa. And I'm talking about the actual case of Gert van Rooyen and Joey Haarhoff, who allegedly abducted 6 known victims. Previously, it was scoffed at when anyone would suggest that the children may have been trafficked, but with the new Jeffrey Epstein awareness and child trafficking, it is now being looked at once again. In the first video, I'm going to give you a basic introduction to Gert van Rooyen and Joey Haarhoff, and the alleged victims and the circumstances surrounding their disappearances. At this point, let's start with a very quick and basic timeline on the making of Gert van Rooyen. In 1954, Gert van Rooyen goes to a reform school for stealing a car and a rifle. In 1960, Gert van Rooyen is incarcerated for stealing motor spares and clothing. In 1979, Gert van Rooyen abducted 2 girls, took them to Hartbeespoort, assaulted them and forced them to perform sexual acts, and then released them in Pretoria. Sentenced to 4 years, and finally he only served 3. In 1983, Gert divorced his wife Aletta, and in 1988, Gert starts dating Joey Haarhoff. Then, between August 1988 and the 11th of January 1990, Gert van Rooyen, with the help of Joey Haarhoff, abducts 7 girls. And these are only the known cases. Personally, I believe there were more. Nonetheless, on the 15th of January 1990, Gert and Joey are found dead in their vehicle from gunshot wounds to the head, which is now being sold to us as a suicide that took place after being chased by the police. I'm going to stop the short timeline here and continue with the introduction to the actual known victims, and we'll discuss the rest of the timeline and the case in further videos. The first alleged known victim of Gert van Rooyen and Joey Haarhoff was Tracy Lee Scott Crosley from Randburg. She was 14 years old when she was allegedly abducted by van Rooyen and Haarhoff on the 1st of August 1988. Tracy Lee would have been 45 years old this year. Tracy Lee would have been one of 4 children had an older brother not died before the age of 1. Instead, she was the younger sister of 2 brothers, Sean, 9 years older, and Mark, 7 years older. There was a particularly close bond between Tracy Lee and Mark. When Tracy Lee was 10, her parents Noreen and Paul divorced. On Saturday, 30th of July 1988, Tracy Lee was taken to a doctor as she was not feeling well. On Monday, the 1st of August 1988, she stayed at home from school. Her mother suggested that she join her at work, but she said that she would stay in bed and walk to the Cresta shopping center later. Her mother suggested that they go to the mall together during her lunch hour, but when she returned home, Tracy Lee was not at home and she found a roll of sweets and some change on a table. Tracy Lee had asked her brother Mark to walk with her to the shopping center, but he declined, saying that he had other things to do, a decision which haunts him to this day. Tracy Lee was last seen by witnesses getting into a Volkswagen Beetle outside the Cresta shopping mall. Although Tracy Lee and Rosa Peel, I will discuss Rosa Peel much later in follow-up videos. Although the 2 of them are the only 2 girls who cannot be forensically linked to van Rooyen, it is generally accepted that she was indeed one of his victims. This belief mostly hinges on witness statements, and no other proof, forensically or otherwise, could be found to substantiate this. In the aftermath of Van Rooyen's death, there were numerous sightings, one of which placed Tracy Lee at the Chelsea Hotel in Berea, Johannesburg. None of these reports yielded any fruit, and what happened to Tracy Lee remains a mystery. As is the human nature, a number of allegations and speculations did the rounds. As Tracy Lee was the eldest of the girls who had disappeared, and well into her teens, there were the usual rumors of her having been a runaway teen. To date, neither her family nor her friends could come up with a reason why Tracy Lee would want to run away. By the time of her disappearance, her parents' divorce was ancient news. She was close to her brother, there was no note, none of her clothing was missing, and so forth. Once all the options had been weighed, one has no other option but to assume that Tracy Lee had been taken against her will, and that she was seduced, like the other girls, into leaving with Joey Haroff or another of Van Rooyen's allies. There is, however, a deviance from the other cases. In all the other cases, it appears as if the children were taken and disappeared into thin air in a matter of seconds or minutes. In Tracy Lee's case, there is, however, speculation that she had gotten into a vehicle but had been taken home, where she left the sweets and change on the table, collected a blanket which was at the foot end of her bed, and again left with the same person with whom she had left the Cresta Center. All indications are, however, that she intended to return home, as the school books were left open on the table, etc. Thus, regardless of what transpired, or what she was told to make her leave with the blonde woman in the Volkswagen Beetle, Tracy Lee expected to be home again soon, and she wasn't. A lot of the information I had just given, particularly the blanket which she had taken from her bed, did not appear in the mainstream media, but was found on a Janie Allen website. Janie used to be a fairly well-known journalist in South Africa. I'm going to leave a link to her website in the description box below if you want to go read this for yourself. The second alleged victim was Fiona Harvey. 3 days before Christmas 1988, Fiona was sent to buy milk from a nearby store. She never returned. A witness reported that she was talking to a man in a white Ford Bantam bakkie. It was later confirmed to belong to Gert van Rooyen. Fiona was 12 when she disappeared. It must be remembered that in 1988 it was not uncommon for children to be sent on errands, walk to friends' houses, or to play outside of their yards. White suburbia was considered safe then. Fiona lived in Pietermaritzburg, which still today is nicknamed Sleepy City. Fiona would have turned 43 this year. There had been 2 sightings of Fiona Harvey after the death of Van Rooyen. The first sighting has been talked about in the media, and the second is one I found by doing some research. The first sighting happened on the 7th of May 1990, when a businessman, Johan Blanchet, reported spotting Fiona Harvey, a dead Boucher, and Anna-Marie Wapenaar in Lusaka, Zambia. We'll discuss this further in part 2 or 3 when we discuss the actual case. The second reference to a sighting of Fiona was an obscure post I found on Facebook. The lady said that it bothered her that in 1989 she was on a flight to the Caprivi, she did not say from where, and with her on the military plane was a middle-aged couple with a blonde girl of approximately 12. At first she thought the couple was the child's grandparents, But the child did not look happy, and there was very little interaction between the child and the couple. Later, she saw photographs of Fiona and was sure that it could have been her. Unfortunately, I did not copy and paste the post and now cannot find it. Something noteworthy, and which we shall also discuss further at a later stage, is the fact that Fiona Harvey is an adopted child, and thus police were not able to collect DNA from her parents for their records. The third girl allegedly abducted by Gert van Rooyen and Jerry Haroff was Joan Horn. On the 7th of June 1989, Joan Horn, 12 at the time, and two friends were walking to a dog show when a white Ford Bantam Bucky with a blonde woman of approximately 40 stopped and offered Joan 20 rand to show her where some place was. Joan got in and was never seen again. The woman was later identified as Joey Haroff. Joan would have turned 42 this year. Our investigation turned up that Joan was the only girl mentioned by name when Flippy van Rooyen, Gert van Rooyen's son, whom I will also discuss a little more further on, made a statement during his incarceration saying that Joan was strangled by van Rooyen. Again, we discovered that Joan was an adopted child, thus no DNA could be collected from her parents. The two of the other victims were Odette Boucher and Annemarie Wapenaar. Odette Boucher and her best friend Annemarie Wapenaar were abducted by Gert van Rooyen and Jerry Haroff on the 22nd of September 1989. Odette was 11 and Annemarie 12 when they were abducted. Odette would have turned 39 this year on the 13th of February. The girls that walked home, Odette would have turned 41 in 2019 on the 13th of February. The girls that walked home from school and decided to go for a swim near Odette's house. We unearthed a few things which were not made public in the media. One of the first things we found was a Facebook post in which Natasha Boucher states that both Gert and Joey were known to the children before the abduction. This matter will be discussed further in either part 2 or 3 because I have more information in regards to this than mentioned elsewhere. The last known successfully abducted victim, let me put it like this, was Yolanda Wessels. On the 3rd of November 1989, Yolanda Wessels, the 13-year-old niece of Van Rooyen's partner, Joey Haroff, disappeared. Joey Haroff's sister, Babs, gave birth to Yolanda when she was 40 years old. Yolanda was one of 5 children, all girls. Babs passed away 2 years ago, probably about 3 years ago by now. I'm not going to speak much about Yolanda Wessels at this point, as there are a number of allegations which came out during formal investigations as well as during our personal investigations, and I will discuss that under the actual case and investigation in part 2 or 3. There were other known victims, namely Joan Boyson. It's alleged that Rosa Peel was one of Gert van Rooyen's victims, and then one other girl, although it is our belief that there were many others. But for this video, I'm already exceeding my time limit of 15 minutes, so we shall discuss this in follow-up parts on the saga. In order to link part 1 with part 2, I will continue with a very short timeline, and we will start off where we left off last time, and that is on the 15th of January 1990, when Gert and Joey were found dead in their vehicle after a police chase and from an apparent murder-suicide. On the 25th of January 1990, a pedestrian spots Tracy Lee at a Chelsea hotel in Berea, Johannesburg. According to police, there was no confirmation, but in part 3 I will deal with this matter in a more lengthy manner. On the 7th of May 1990, businessman Johan Blanchet, or Blanche, I'm not sure how he pronounces his names, spots 3 girls, possibly Anne-Marie Wapenaar, Adet Patsche, and Fiona Harvey in Lusaka, Zambia. According to police, they could not find any trace of the girls. In June 1990, a letter is found at Fabric Library Midrand by Deborah Sloan. It was confirmed by handwriting experts that it was indeed Anne-Marie Wapenaar's handwriting. The note gave a northern suburbs address. I will also deal with this matter later on, as there's more to it than this. September 1991, a J.P. van der Merwe makes a statement to police at Weskoppies, a mental hospital, saying that Van Rooyen buried 3 bodies under the dunes at his holiday home in Umdloti. 1991, Philippus Henrico Slippy van Rooyen, son of Gert, who was jailed for murdering and removing the organs of a 15-year-old Zimbabwean girl, makes statements to police saying his father was involved in a child kidnapping ring with 3 National Party ministers. He also said that his father killed, actually he said strangled, Joan Horn, and he said that some of the children were taken to the Middle East. In 1994, a newspaper article appears, searching for Anna Margareta Hopley, also using the surnames Harris and Lombard, as she had been in contact with Van Rooyen until his death. In 1996, ABSA, one of South Africa's biggest banks, donates the house to the South African police for excavation, and nothing is found. I would think a good place to start the investigation would be with the death of Gert and Joey. The police report states that at midnight on the 14th, Gert and Joey approached the house at 227 Malherbe Street in Gert's vehicle. They apparently noticed the 2 policemen in an unmarked vehicle. Gert then accelerates, moves in a western direction, turns right into Paul Kruger Street, and then left in Flower Street. The police are pursuing them. Shots ring out. According to police, Joey had her hands up at one point and then fell flat. More shots rang out, and when police broke the left passenger window with a fire extinguisher, they found both Joey and Gert dead from an apparent murder-suicide. Now the questions, of which there are many, but I'm going to deal with only 2. Where is the gun residue report proving that Gert shot both Joey and himself? According to his son, there is no such report. From photographs provided to me, and of which some are in the Van Rooyen family's possession, I have even more questions, and again, I'm only going to address one in particular. My question is, why would anyone shoot himself, or the other person for that matter, in the back of the head if they're seated next to each other on the front seat of a utility vehicle? It's firstly a very awkward place to shoot yourself or anyone else. Why not through the temple or under the chin, which is a more regular way of committing murder or suicide? At this point, I want to take a bit of a leap back and discuss the person I did not mention in the first video, and that is Joan Boyson, the girl who got away and whose escape actually led to police pursuing Gert and Joey. In January 1990, a blonde woman abducted Joan Boyson, 16, from Church Square in Pretoria. She later escaped despite being sexually assaulted, drugged, tied up and placed in a cupboard. Her escape then led to Van Rooyen and Harold's demise. In an interview on the 23rd of November 2009, Joan said that she used the lid of a cooler box to open the hook on the other side of the cupboard door. She made her way to the lounge and looked outside. Harold was in the garden and there was no sign of Van Rooyen. She phoned a cousin, briefly telling her what happened and where the house was. Then she ran outside, flagged down a car, told the man what happened, and passed out. We assume that the man drove her to the nearest police station, as Van Rooyen's house was placed under surveillance that evening. We, however, discovered glaring discrepancies when listening to interviews by Joan and her sister, and I will put a link to one of these interviews in the description box. Although one cannot pin fabrications on Joan or her sister, somehow they must have spoken to one another about the matter, which is only a natural thing to do. First, in the interview, she speaks about Joe Harold. The interviewer even asks her who Joe is, but she persists in speaking about Joey Harold as Joe. Secondly, she says Van Rooyen and Harold were married. They were never married. Thirdly, she explains the escape and leaves me with questions, particularly as we had by now already collected as many photographs of the original house as possible and had even taken aerial photographs of the yard as it is now in order to get the lay of the land. Fourth, as this is where the story becomes a little too much, Joan's sister tells about the coincidence and tells about a project Joan did a year or two before she was abducted, which concerned the other abducted girls. She remembers how Joan had cut the photographs of the other girls from the milk cartons. This is not quite possible. Had she said a month or 2 or 3 before she was abducted, but a year or 2? No. The girls were abducted between August 1988, Tracy Lee, and 11th of January, when Joan Boyson herself was allegedly abducted. This a period of 17 months. Yolanda Wessels was abducted only 2 months and 8 days before Joan Boyson. So how could she possibly have done a project on the other girls a year or 2 before she was abducted? Had she done work on the missing girls, why then did she allow a woman with blonde hair to entice her into her car? We will continue with this later. I will post a few questions in the description box for you to have a look at, and perhaps you guys will give me a better idea and understanding of this scenario. As mentioned before, some of the information we gathered perplexed and confused us just more and more. The first thing to specifically jump out at us is the following. In 2001, Flippy van Rooyen, Gert's son, whom I've mentioned before, was found guilty on 3 counts of perjury. This was based on the following statements he had made. 1. That his father was involved in a paedophile ring, which included 3 National Party ministers. 2. That his father killed Joan Horn by strangling her. 3. That some of the kids were sent to the Middle East. At the time of finding this information, it was not about whether his statements were true or not, but about the fact that it is legally impossible to find someone guilty of perjury if it cannot be proven that he was lying. As the case was never solved and his claims could to date not be proven true or false, it is clear to us that such a judgment was severely flawed. It immediately raised a red flag, and we started asking why this had happened. The only logical explanation we could come up with was that what he said must have been somehow close to the truth. Another reason why we suspected that there was at least some truth to what he stated was that he specifically mentioned Joan Horn and said that his father strangled her. Had he been lying, he would most likely have said that his father killed her. When lying, someone would either be vague or would provide too much information, in other words, build a story to try and convince the audience. He did neither. He said his father strangled Joan Horn, and that was that. The second thing which jumped out at us was the number of leads in the case, and the fact that all of the published leads were proven to be false. We turned to statistics and maths to provide us with a clue here, but for the purposes of this video, we'll stick to a simple explanation. In any criminal case, there may be 20 leads, of which 10 may be completely false and misleading, 5 which may be a false positive, in other words, a possibility, and 5 which may be true or worth pursuing. Yet, after a thorough search of old newspaper clippings, internet comments, and many other sources, we compiled a list of 20 probable clues and were shocked to find that in all scenarios the verdicts, in inverted commas, were that the clues were false, untrue, or yielded nothing. Again, the warning bell sounded loud and clear. We felt that, at the very least, one of the clues should have been a false positive, in other words, a possibility. Yet most of what we could find were reported to be false or untrue, just a figment of someone's imagination, or yielded no further information. How could this be? Then we made another startling discovery. Whenever someone, often an expert, like Klatzo, I think that's how you pronounce his surname, a forensic scientist, disagreed with the police, he was taken off the case or blocked from obtaining information. Okay, so now I've laid the groundwork for the next video, in which we will discuss the rest of the so-called untrue, false leads, and we'll discuss them with more information and more of what we unearthed during our digging. So please, I just want to remind you to go to the description box and also to follow me on Tumblr, where I will continue with the blog and provide more detailed information on what's being discussed in this video. Please note, most of the information and photographs were found in the public domain. The few items not found on the internet was given to me by the legal owners for publication. I mean no disrespect to the victims, their families, the extended family of Van Rooyen and Haarhof, or the investigators past and present. As you have probably gathered, a couple of years ago, myself, some friends, and an investigator started our own investigation. I'm not going to go into it too much as to the reason why and what we intended with it, as that is a story on its own. So I'm just going to jump right in and tell you how we started off. We started off wanting to get hold of newspaper clippings from 1988 to 1994, hoping we could start building a puzzle and then work on the missing pieces. This proved more difficult than we thought. A long time had elapsed, and it had resulted in these articles no longer being available online, and our only option was to visit the archives of various newspapers, something which would have been extremely time-consuming and virtually impossible for us to do, seeing that we are ordinary working-class citizens. Although we spent some time scratching around in press clippings, we put it on the back burner and decided to go about it the hard way, by taking the shorter route. In a way, this was a good decision, but also in a way a huge mistake, because we dove in head first and with too little information. I was tasked to make contact with as many people involved in the case as I could, and to get their assistance and involvement, to make allies of them, as naively we believed that as a team we could solve the matter. This was our first mistake, because the very first reaction to our offer of a free investigation was met with a reaction we did not anticipate. This was a lesson learned, but it left us with a perplexing question. We were starting an investigation 28 years at that time, after the fact, and it was obvious to us that we had to proceed with caution and be careful not to approach the wrong people. But who were we to trust and who not? We started searching for witnesses whom the police did not take seriously, but who at the same time appeared sincere and trustworthy. Knowing that this would also be a risk, we tried to do as much homework on each of them as we could. The first person we contacted was Alta Claassen, and as luck would have it, she did not live too far from me. Alta herself was abducted as a teenager. Alta and her younger sister were sent to a shopping center to buy certain items. Once back outside, they found that they had forgotten an item they had to buy. The sister went back inside while Alta stayed outside with the shopping bag. A few minutes later, Alta was approached by a man who introduced himself as a policeman. He informed Alta that her sister was at an entrance on the opposite side of the shopping center and that she was crying. He asked Alta to accompany him to where her sister was. Alta wanted to run through the center, but he suggested they take his car to the other side. Alta was then kept for a few days before she managed to escape through a bathroom window. She was distraught and scared and kept running, although there were other occupied properties nearby. As she approached a main road, she was spotted by a squad car and picked up. An investigation followed, but turned up nothing much, as the abductors had fled from the scene. This was not the end of Alta's troubles, as a few months later another incident took place, and although this incident did not, by any indication or proof of evidence, have anything to do with child kidnapping, Alta had to suffer once more. Only a couple of months later, she was visiting a cousin and a friend who were both stationed at Wits Commando in Johannesburg. While waiting for her cousin, she was standing outside talking to a young serviceman she liked when a valiant bakkie approached slowly. The occupant even stared straight at Alta as he got out of the valiant bakkie. Being a teenager, she even asked, "Wat kyk jy? Ek is nie te koop nie." "What are you looking at? I'm not for sale." Minutes later, the young serviceman she liked so much and was chatting to was flung into the guardroom, and Alta was lying on the pavement, severely injured by a car bomb set behind Groskopf. It was the 31st of July, 1987. Alta was to lose her left eye as a direct result of the bomb blast. Armed with this information, it was now our turn to look into certain matters or coincidences. I googled Hein Groskopf, and although the bomb blast happened so many years ago, information was still readily available. And in this video, I will paste an extract from a book called Total Onslaught: Apartheid's Dirty Tricks Exposed, and post a photograph of Alta and Hein Groskopf during the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings. In any event, our investigation led to a very strange twist in this case. Hein Groskopf was a member of the ANC's MK military wing, and in the late 80s and 90s, probably the most wanted man in South Africa. No arguments there, it is widely documented. But is there more to tell? We discovered two strange facts about Hein Groskopf. Groskopf returned to the ANC headquarters in Lusaka on the 30th of June 1989, as far as we know. Businessman Johan Blanche reported that he spotted a dead bouncer, Annemarie Wapenaar, and Fiona Harvey in Lusaka in May 1990. We found it strange that Lusaka appears in two seemingly unrelated cases, although the victim of the bomb blast was also a victim of an abduction. We also found it strange that through Alta Claassen we could now, with a little imagination, possibly link Hein Groskopf to at least 3 of the missing girls. However, just as we were about to think that it was too much of a stretch, we discovered what Hein Groskopf was to become later. Hein popped up in the UK in the 90s, where he held the position of Child Protection Officer at the Blackburn branch of the NSPCC from 1999 to 2003, whereafter he became the manager of the NSPCC Acorn Centre. After many complaints, he left in 2005, however, still remains a social worker to this day. He was re-registered in 2012, and he currently runs a private counselling service with his common-law wife, Dorothy Heaps, from their home in Cayley in West Yorkshire. Stranger than fiction? It certainly is. That Alta was a victim of a terrorist attack is certain. That Hein Groskopf was a terrorist working for the ANC's Nkonto Sizwe is a known fact. But was there any other motive other than the political one behind the Wits commando bombing in 1987? Was it just perhaps a final attempt of getting rid of Alta? Could we perhaps call it a dual-purpose bombing? So on to the next lead, with a very weird outcome. 5 months after the deaths of Gert van Rooyen and Joey Haroff, a letter, which I've referred to before, was found at the Fabric Library in Midrand. A shop assistant remembered seeing a girl of approximately 12 with short black hair. I can still see her sitting there and wondered why she was looking so scared, Deborah Sloan told the Star newspaper. Shortly after seeing the girl, she discovered the letter between carpet samples. It read, "I am Annemarie. My friend and I are with our kidnappers. and then it gave an upmarket Johannesburg Northern Suburbs street address. My friend has tried to phone but was cut off. A handwriting expert, as well as Anne-Marie's mother, confirmed that the note was written by Anne-Marie Wapenaar. 29 years later, though, it got even stranger, because in 2018 it was reported in the media that this letter, or a letter, or the letter, was again tested, and that it was found that it was not written by Anne-Marie Wapenaar. Now I'm going completely off script here, and I am going to stick my neck out and risk getting into trouble by saying the following. 2 years ago, I saw a copy of the original note, and now in 2018, well, I actually only saw it now in 2019, another copy of the supposed letter that was found in Fabric Library was actually printed in local newspapers. And I may be wrong, and I really want to stress the fact that I may be wrong. But looking at that letter and remembering the other copy, or let's call it the original copy I saw, I'm not sure that the one they had tested by a handwriting expert now, 29 years later, is actually indeed the same letter. And I'll tell you why. Looking at the handwriting of the one which has recently been published in newspapers, although just glancing at it, it looks the same, the handwriting looks somehow stressed, as if it was copied. The other thing is also that from what I remember of the original letter, it wasn't written on a full scrap paper. It was actually, I would say, on a 3/4 of an A4, or just larger than half of an A4 page. However, the one now presented in the newspaper is actually on a complete A4 page. I may be wrong. The copy I've seen may have been cropped so many years ago, 29, 30 years ago, but I'm not sure, and I'm really feeling very uncomfortable about this. I'm going to bring this letter up again, so please keep in mind what I've said, because I am going to bring it up again in part 4 or 5. Assuming, though, that I'm incorrect and that I've made a huge mistake, and that the actual letter was not written by Anne-Marie Wapenaar, please remind yourself of what Deborah Sloan said. She said that she saw a distressed 12-year-old girl in the shop with short dark hair, or short black hair. Both Odette and Anne-Marie had blonde hair. The only one of the known victims who had short dark hair was Yolanda Wessels. However, nowhere in any paper or any of the writings of the investigators do I actually pick up that they consider that Yolanda Wessels could have been the one who wrote the letter. Today I'm not going to stick to a script, as I want to cram as much information into this video as possible. Unfortunately, you will also have to watch part 3 in order to understand the beginning of this video. I'm going to start straight away with the letter which we discussed in part 3, with only a few more things to say about it. If Annemarie Wapenaar was not the author of that letter found in Fabric Library, but indeed Yolanda Wessels wrote the letter, being a dark-haired, short-haired 12-year-old, then that would account for the misspelling of Annemarie's name, as Annemarie's name is spelled M-A-R-I and not M-A-R-I-E as in the letter. The I-E will be the normal spelling in Afrikaans, their home language. Anyway, that is speculation. In my heart, I feel that there was more truth in the original report 29 years ago than in the current one, and I will explain this later when I come to the press and a certain journalist's part in the investigation, and I hope I can get to that very quickly and maybe end off with part 5 and go on to another story. Anyway, the other thing I need to say about the letter, which to me was very significant, is that right at the end it says, "My friend tried to phone but was cut off." And this is where things get very strange, as a lot of people are really trying very hard to make us believe that these children were all killed. Yet Odette did indeed phone her godmother and aunt a couple of months, approximately 5 months after Van Rooyen and Harold were killed. She was cut off, but before she was cut off, she said that they were at some airport. Now, having grown up until the age of 11 and 12 in Kempton Park, there is almost no way that either Annemarie or Odette could not have known had they been at Jan Smuts Airport, which is now called Johannesburg International. Thus, they were, if that call was from Odette, then they were at some or other airport, and that would exclude Jan Smuts Airport. Now, it could have been one of the other bigger airports like Durban or Cape Town, but it could also have been a military airport. And as most of the bigger airports were almost immediately searched, I would rather go for a smaller airport like a military airport. And I actually managed to find a screenshot that I took of someone who thought she saw one of the girls on a military plane. I thought I had lost the screenshot, but I managed to recover it, and I will post it here. The other thing which is significant concerning this note is the actual address, which is blanked out in this post. But what I also find strange is that the police took more than 2 weeks before they actually approached that address, and obviously found nothing. Indeed concerning is information which came to light during our investigation with regards to this address. It has been reported to us that the address given was that of a prominent and wealthy person, and that police took it upon themselves to decide that the information on the address could not be correct. Now, this address at the time belonged to a very prominent, very wealthy person with a Jewish-sounding name who had international business interests and allegedly also some political clout. So I will leave it up to you to decide why the police took more than 2 weeks, if not more than 3, to approach that address. And if you guys think of the current headlines with regards to Jeffrey Epstein, you will also know exactly why I've decided to come out with the information I have and to do it now. I am once again going to jump around a bit, and I apologize for that, but there is just so much material available that it is virtually impossible to deal with one part of the evidence all in one go, in one video, or in a straight timeline. What I would like to discuss very quickly is again the disappearance of Tracy Lee Scott Crosley. Like I said before, I have my doubts as to whether Tracy was one of Gert van Rooyen and Joey Harold's victims. What I do believe is that Tracy did not intend to run away. Tracy did indeed intend to return home. What concerns me though, and what I would have thought the police or other investigators would have looked into before, is the fact that unlike the other victims, Tracy got into a vehicle with an unknown person, blonde-haired woman, and she was actually returned home, where she dropped off her purchases, removed a pink blanket from the foot end of her bed, went back to the same person, got into the same vehicle, and took off, never to be seen again. This tells me something. Tracy was somehow familiar with this woman. It is either someone she had spoken to before or greeted before, could have been at the shopping mall or anywhere else that she frequented. The reason why I'm saying this is that whoever took Tracy felt comfortable to be seen with her, to be parked outside her home for a period of time, be it even only 5 minutes. But she was definitely not nervous, otherwise she would not have taken Tracy home first. That also leads you to believe that there is some story this person told Tracy to get her to leave once again, as Tracy knew that her mother was coming home during her lunchtime, etc. So thus Tracy definitely did not remove her blanket from the foot end of her bed to go on a picnic with this person. This person must have used some other ruse, and I've discussed it with my children and grandchildren, and I asked them to come up with a story. What would someone have told them to make them take the same actions? And one thing one of my kids came up with was that this person probably told her that she had run over a puppy or there was an injured animal somewhere and she needed Tracy to come and help her with it. So the fact that there was some incident, some familiarity, not just between Tracy and this person, but also between this person and the area Tracy lived in, is something I would have looked at the time, had I been one of the investigators. Something else which bothers me about Tracy's specific case is the fact that more so than with any of the other known victims, Tracy was spotted numerous times after her abduction, years after her disappearance. And what I find hard to believe is that none of these incidences, or at least very few of them, actually made the news, or as far as I know, were fully investigated. I have been privy to some conversations between WhatsApp and Facebook conversations between people very involved in the case years ago, where they themselves had actually spotted Tracy, and somehow she managed to get away from them, refused to speak to them, and they had no legal recourse to hold her. There was even a rumor, and I believe there was a report or a book or an article written about Tracy Lee's father and a private investigator who actually found her in Korea, Johannesburg, near the Chelsea Hotel, and it was alleged that she also ran away from them and was obviously had some kind of help to then disappear. As I could not find any reference to any such article or book or report, I did, however, manage to find a newspaper report in an Afrikaans newspaper, which I translated. And it reads as follows, or part of it reads as follows. The missing schoolgirl, Tracy Lee Scott Crosley, then in brackets 16, so I assume this article was published approximately 2 years after Tracy's disappearance. The missing schoolgirl, Tracy Lee Scott Crosley, apparently still worked as an escort at the Johannesburg agency less than a year ago. Her ex-employer has been pointed out as a co-worker of the dangerous Taiwanese mafia. The mafia known as, and then I cannot pronounce the name or title, specialize in the slave trade, drug trade, prostitution and blackmail, and it is feared the world over. 2 members of the mafia was apprehended at the Jan Smuts airport. With them were 3 girls who they intended to send to Taiwan, reads the report. However, I have not seen any follow-up reports or anything else referring to Tracy in this regard, and I found that rather strange and concerning. Okay, I'm going to end the video here. I was hoping to cram more into this video, but as I did not stick to a script this week, it was virtually impossible. I also apologize for the noise in the background. The kids are on holiday and playing Minecraft, and it is in excess of 40 degrees outside, so I could not put the poor budgies outside. In any event, in the next part, part 5, we will discuss, amongst other things, the role of the media in this case. I thank you for watching, and I'll be back soon.